Welcome to the Independent Artist Podcast, sponsored by the National Association of Independent Artists.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. I'm Will Armstrong, and I'm a mixed media artist.
I'm Douglas Sigworth, glassblower. Join our conversations with professional working artists. We're all familiar with the expression, you got to put your best foot forward. You know, I'm quite an optimist. But Will, I have a question for you. What do you do if you don't have a best foot? I don't know that I even have one.
Get on the good foot. That's my James Brown medley for you. I don't know. I thought about that at La Quinta last year when I was walking behind you after dinner. And I'm like, it was November and you're getting ready to go into the surgery in a couple of weeks. And I'm like, he's really limping on his good foot. Like, which one is good?
Well, I think I have a new plan. Yeah. So at the last show I was at, they've got the circus performers that come down the center of the street. They're juggling and on their stilts. I'm going to learn how to walk on my hands because they got to be better than my feet. And I'm just going to follow that freak parade down the street and become part of the show.
I do catch myself, like when we're talking and you're asking about a certain restaurant or the hotel and where the hotel is. I'm like, oh, it's great because it's walking distance. And I am like, oh, God.
For whom?
What did I just, No. It's scooter distance.
I joke about it. I am getting a lot better. Although I did a good friend out there on the road. I'm not gonna call him out by name, but I thought this was kind of a fun little statement. It's the end of the day and I am just wiped. I'm walking with my cane and this artist says to me, "You look more and more frail every time I see you."
That's not funny. That's that cane is a weapon. Swing that cane. Yeah, like wind up. Good Lord.
Anyway,
nah, I was going to say the opposite. You're looking lean and mean. I know you're in a chair, man. but yeah, it's a love fest here at the Independent Artist Podcast.
That's right.
No, you're looking good.
Thanks.
You're looking good, and I got a haircut, so
got them all cut.
I did for sure. So, well, I didn't have a show last weekend. I know you did. How did Greenville treat you?
Greenville was good. We just got home last night. And the thing I wanted to talk about is we have had this conversation before about like, how long do you drive in a day? What's like your ideal day or something like that? And we put in a day yesterday that beat any of the other records that we've ever done. We drove 1,050 miles in a single day.
What did that, like, what are we talking hours-wise? I should know that, but what are we talking?
Well, on the van, when it tells you how much drive time it was, I'm not exactly sure about, like, duration, but the drive time was 17 hours. That was a little crazy. That was too much.
Yeah, that's insane. Typically, I'll find, like, if I average it by 60, you can get in a little more because, you know, highway miles are 70 or 75 or the last few shows I've done have been so goddamn windy, and I've been driving those tall box trucks that just been pushing me around and catching that, you know, when it pushes you too far in the lane and you do a lane change and it drops you out of the cruise control. And man, that's a long ass drive. Is that a one shot from Greenville to Wisconsin?
We got to Asheville the first day because we had a day of some installations and home visits, and we just only had an hour in us that day to get anywhere.
Fancy.
So, yeah, fancy. So it was pretty much, a one-shot deal, and we weren't planning on it, I tell you. But I was kind of thinking about what you brought up last episode when you were saying you kind of reach those mile markers where you're like, you know, well, this is only a podcast or this is only a chapter in this book. Well, we got to Madison. It's like we're practically home, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, you're not stopping in Madison.
Right.
There's no way. It's like, there's no way I'm stopping in New Mexico at all. You know, I mean, it's a big enough state, but I'm like if I'm in New Mexico, there's no way in hell you're stopping me. But yeah, breaking that trip up, man, the mountain leg, and it's the Klein's Corner leg, and it's leg, you know, and you just break it up, and suddenly you're home. But,
those pieces, those segments, and we have Renee and I were trading off. But I mean, she did more than half of the drive yesterday, but it does help to be able to do like an every 2-hour switch off. And I think somewhere along the trip yesterday, I thought to myself, we're in Pearl and we're in St. Louis. So we're considering that whole cannonball run. Like, are we even capable of doing it? So this was our trial run to see if we can do the crazy cannonball run this year.
Okay. All right. The thing about the cannonball run is that if you're thinking about it, it means you juried pretty well, you know?
Yeah. So it's hard because you're like, I don't want to turn those two shows down, but then the Daryl Thetford thing, the courage to say no. Can you say no? Or do you have the ability to say no? Or, how did the rest of the schedule play in that you're like, no, I kind of have to do it. So
sure. And I kick my taxes to September anyway, so I'm going to owe a huge chunk in September. So anything I get, pretty much, I'm going to take. Kind of leading into that to just pay that bill. But man, that's a tricky one.
Yeah,
I've got a topic that I was going to bring up that I'm not sure that we're going to be able to air. So I don't know where my mouth is going to lead. My I've got my thoughts in my brain, and I'm not sure how my mouth is going to handle it. But
all right, well, bring it. Come on.
I think that you get certain jurors and you get certain academics that judge the show, and what I would ask them, and I don't necessarily, I would love it if I were in every conversation, but I'm not. Sometimes people see my work and they're like, it's not what I'm looking for, and that's fine, and we move on and we get our other shows.
Right, for sure.
I don't necessarily want to call anybody out by name or little tiny ponytail. But the thing that I'm asking here is, do you want somebody on your jury that has not just doesn't understand our industry, but has disdain for it? Like most two-dimensional teachers do not suggest to their students to go out and pursue a career in the arts that has a tent and pro panels and a roof. I mean, they're like, it's gallery or nothing for those guys. So they just don't understand what we do on the street, and they kind of look down their nose at it.
We're back to that old topic again, are we?
I mean, no, I'm not getting there at, I'm certainly not getting at the topic of those who can do and those who can't teach, because I do think that there's some bullshit in that, and David Bierstrom's husband will come strangle me in the middle because there's nobody more talented than that guy.
No, my point is the topic about, so some art teachers, academics, they don't advocate this industry, that they think that this is kind of a sellout market. And we don't know, like when we see an academic is on the jury, where their head is at. Like it might be nice to know a little bit more background as to what their input might be or what their belief. Like, would they teach it to their students? I mean, is that something?
I doubt it. That's
think?
My point. I don't think they would. I think they'd be like, I had to be on the street this weekend and look at all these hacks out there. I think they look down their nose. Maybe that's just me and a giant chip that I know that I've got on my shoulder.
Like your baggage that you bring to the jury room.
I bring some, for sure.
Because my teacher wasn't like that. I mean, we got into this art show market kind of like Schwegman, kind of like the conversation we had with Bill Kidd, where our teacher was an art show artist. And he would go out and do the shows.
Do you see the difference? It's craft.
Well, true.
And that has always been the market for craft. And there is a hoity-toity thing with 2D that looks down its nose at craft. I certainly do not. I know what goes into it. I've been actually a craft artist myself in my career. So I feel like I know both sides pretty well. But I do know that in school, I had to go to the illustration department and learn how to paint the way that I wanted to paint there and follow that pursuit as opposed to the fine art track because of the kind of work that I wanted to create and how they look down their nose like, well, this is illustration, I'm no Andrew Wyeth, but he dealt with it too back in the day. Is this illustration or is this painting? And
it's interesting because I've heard conversations, back through the seasons on the podcast about the idea of gatekeeping. This might be another example. If we're choosing somebody who is going to jury to get exhibitors into a show market, what is their biases? What do they bring to the jury room? And is it something that a show director should maybe flesh out so that they know what their kind of result is going to be from their jury, And
maybe they want it, maybe they want a completely different view, and that's the point. But
for balance?
I guess the balance between that. But my only point is if you not only don't know the industry, you don't understand what is out there and why. You don't understand what is being represented, but you actually have disdain for it. That's when I wonder if you belong.
And I guess you might suspect, because of what you've experienced in academia when you were there, that perhaps that's a common theme. So that, I don't know, maybe it comes full circle again?
It always has been as far as my experience. And I know that's limited. I went to prep school. I'm reeking in privilege. You can just see it through the screen. But my dad worked at an all girls private school, and I grew up in that environment. Went to the boys' brother school down the road, and did that thing. Was expected to go to college when I graduated. That's my history. It's very Dead Poet Society. I didn't wear the little tie, but I did definitely no jeans and khakis and tuck in your shirt. I don't know. I mean, this is my experience, and coming to it from that, and then going to college and having that kind of privilege, and then seeing somebody with the level of privilege above that does not have to create in order to receive a paycheck, and then they look down their nose at what I'm doing. It's kind of like telling the rock band not to perform in clubs. You should be performing at Carnegie Hall. Well, fuck you. I got to get there some way, and maybe I like the clubs. And I don't belong in every show. I don't deserve to get through every single jury.
Yeah, none of us do.
I'm not that fucking arrogant, but I'm lucky enough to have created a career for myself where I'm at least within that conversation.
Definitely.
And that's all I want to do, is to be in that conversation. So if I get a yes, a no, and two maybes, then there's going to be a fight between the yes and the no. Is the yes going to win those other two people over, or is the no going to win over and go through? And that's all that a lot of us can ask to be.
Sometimes we might even think somebody doesn't like our work, and
sometimes they don't.
Well, sometimes they just don't, and I mean that's reality. So I mean we can't get around that. And when we see that person's on the jury and multiple juries, then we can be like, oh, we don't have a good shot at this one, or whatever. I mean, so I recognize that.
Well, yeah. But the thing is, you don't ever find out who the jurors are before the show.
Until post, yeah.
It's always post, and then you're like, well, no wonder.
Yeah.
that guy.
Need not apply.
Need not apply. Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah. So this morning, we pulled down the driveway last night pretty late. It was dark, super dark, and got up this morning, and I looked outside, and I'm like, we got a lot of frickin' yard work to do. It looks like, just disgusting. And our neighbor down the street, she's got signs in her yard that says no mow May. And I don't know if this is just like a Midwest kind of thing, but I had asked her a couple of years ago, what is that all about? And she said it's about the bee population. You shouldn't cut the dandelions because that's what the bees need to feed on, which is integral to our whole ecosystem. Well, it's no mow May. I don't even have to mow. Granted, I'm not doing it for the environment. I'm doing it because I'm lazy and I haven't had a chance to cut my frickin' lawn, so I'm not cutting it now till June.
Yeah, just get a sign.
No mow May.
just no mow May. I'm taking advantage of this. And too soon June as well. We're not going to do it then either. We're just going to grow. I remember a neighbor complaining about my yard one time, and a buddy of mine was like, fuck them, grow sea oats. You don't have an HOA.
Yeah.
You can just do whatever you want. It's your house.
Everyone around us has these golf course lawns. And I'm like, they look over at us and think they must be the hippies or something.
Dude, I've seen your yard. Your yard is just as golf coursey as the next one. You have a beautiful yard.
When have you seen my yard?
You post photos.
Oh, do I?
You post photos, yeah.
I guess
plus, I've driven by your house. I know where you live, Sigworth.
Okay, all right.
I haven't really. That's weird. It got weird.
Actually, what it is you're doing the Google Maps thing and you're checking it all out.
Yeah. God.
You ever Google Earth any of your collectors to see like where you're going, what kind of house you're going to be visiting, or anything like that?
I never have. No.
Okay, that's just stalkery me, maybe. So
you are a little stalkery,
am I?
To be honest. Yeah, when there's a show and like you always I
don't even know if this story is true anyway.
No, I remember a while back and I was like, oh, I got into so and so show, and you're like, well, your neighbor is this person and this person, and your other neighbors. I'm like, Douglas,
that was
how
Road
the hell
Mom.
Do you know?
That was Road Mom. She's the stalker. She told me all up and down the line who was going to be at their last Fort Worth show. She was figuring out that whole block, and she told me.
I mean, that is kind of fun, to be honest. Right.
Who's your neighbor?
Mean, you get to see who your neighbor is. Yeah,
definitely.
Won't you be my neighbor? Little Jay McDougal shout out. He's got a great little series online. I don't think he's been doing them this year.
I haven't seen one since last fall maybe. Come on, Jay. We want to hear about your neighbors. Neighbors are fun.
I look forward to being your neighbor eventually and getting my spot in the sun.
Hang tight. We'll be right back.
This episode of the Independent Artist Podcast is brought to you by Zap, the digital application service where artists and art festivals connect.
Hey, Will, do you remember the old way of doing these applications with red dots on the slides and self-addressed stamped envelopes?
Do you still have a rotary phone, Douglas? No, I don't remember that.
Well, I just like that they were with us back then when we made the switch from analog to digital.
It's a huge switch, and now Zap is the industry standard.
And they're always creating features that make our lives easier too. So I do like what Zap does, and I do like that most of the shows I apply to are on Zapplication.
Exactly. So I personally appreciate what Zap is doing, and thanks for not making us reinvent the wheel every single week like we used to have to do.
Hey, speaking of neighbors, we had one of my recurring neighbors on the show last year. Remember when I talked to Keith Grace?
Yeah.
So Keith and Sherry, they live in Greenville, and that was our last show. They invited us to stay with them. And so we had a nice weekend staying with them, and they invited Margie Rawson and Logan, 3 couples there. We had a really nice time.
Nice. I got to meet her son in Fort Worth.
Fort Worth.
Really cool to have them as neighbors. So I bet that was a lot of fun. Just a little shout out to Margie. She had a fun story at Jazz Fest.
Oh, yeah?
A couple weekends back when the Stones were playing. She was like, boy, I better hurry up with this sale for you. You probably want to sneak over there and see the Stones.
Uh-huh.
He was like, yeah, I got a pretty close seat there. He was one of the sax players. So had a nice sale to one of them. So
nice.
Shout out to Margie for that.
Kind of like our Chris Stapleton story. Yeah, it's so cool. You never know who's walking around there.
Yeah. It's also just as funny. Like I was just texting with Daryl Cox, a super talented artist as well, and part of the Art in the High Desert. And I was just messaging back and forth with him. And I'm like, man, I've only really ever met that guy like in a hotel lobby, and we were both on the way somewhere else, and we had like a 20-second conversation, and I really liked him a lot. And I'm like,
sure.
He has been on the circuit just as long as I have, and I've never been his neighbor, never been able to have a conversation with him. We should see if he wants to come on the show.
I think that'd be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. That seems like a natural fit. Haven't had anybody. Well, there's nobody that does anything like what he does.
So his pieces are wall sculptures, and they're frames that have like tree roots and branches growing into the frame.
Right.
And he did something really cool on social media last year that went viral. He kind of made the illusion of if you sprinkle seeds into a pot or you know what I mean, into a big planter, and then it grew, you know what I mean? So then he shows it coming out of the ground and pulls it out and the roots and everything. And he said there were so many people who thought that was exactly how he made his artwork.
That's amazing.
I love it.
Yeah, it's a seamless mix between organic and like a structured form with what he's creating. So
definitely.
We'll knock on we'll go kick his tires and see if he wants to come chat. Be a good one.
Yeah.
Since we're not, it's thank you folks, by the way, we do not have a guest on this week. I don't know, Douglas and I just have a lot to chat about.
We had a funny moment yesterday. We were both adding notes to the shared note at the same time. And it was like we're trying to write something and we're writing overlapping each other's words. We're like, this is kind of weird.
Yeah. How does my word have a WTF in it? And all of a sudden, like, what's going on?
It's taking over. Hey, but I wanted to jump back to Keith and Sherry and Margie. So Margie is one of those people who was one of the first artists out on the road that we ever met at our very first show. And she did one of those hand-holding things. She came in our booth and she said, I see these guys, they've got potential. And she jumped right on in and started giving good advice. She gave us her card back when, we communicated in very archaic ways, not with text and stuff like that. Right. And she's like, call me, whatever. And she was one of those mentors who I think, she helped us get where we are now with kind of getting a clue on how to do art fairs. So that's kind of cool to have her out there.
Yeah. My wife actually noticed that she was her neighbor, in the last 2 minutes of the show.
Oh, seriously?
She was looked across the street and she's like, oh shit, I never said hi. Now it's time to break down. Anyway.
And jewelers, they can't get out of their booths. So you might as well be a mile away or across the street and you're as far away.
That's the thing, man.
Yeah.
I mean, jewelers have it, I think, absolutely the hardest. You have to be watching your back at all times.
Yeah.
It's super, super stealable. So got to watch yourself. Anyway, hats off to the jewelers out there.
Yeah. We need more jewelers. We need another chat with a jeweler, don't you think? So let's make that one happen too.
Instead of interviewing people, let's just imagine.
Let's talk about who we'd like to talk to.
That's right.
On air.
Oh, it's so nice to have Janine DiCorzenzo on here. It's so thank you for joining us, Aaliyah. You've been lovely. Those are a couple of my favorites
what I'd ask
there.
her?
We'll talk.
Here's what I'd ask her, and then we just can throw it out there, and then you could say, "I bet she'd say this," and then we could just...
here's what she'd say.
There you go.
That's all right.
So, but we had some great chats. Sherry made us a really nice dinner, and it really made me appreciate being in a room with a bunch of artists who we kind of all have very similar experiences, and we can share stories and whatnot. And it made me think about a dinner that we had with some really great friends before we went on this run of shows who aren't artists, just around our neck of the woods here. Civilians, right. And so our friends are telling us about this vacation they were getting ready for. And they were saying, and then we packed this, and then we that. And then we got in the car and we drove all this way. And then as they start describing this, getting ready for the trip and going on the trip, that kind of dawned on them, is that kind of like what you guys experience? And this is the story I told them. I said, we spend like weeks and weeks and weeks making our work. And then that week right before the show, it's like panic mode. It's like, am I going to get all these pieces finished? Am I going to get the van packed? Am I going to get it all to fit? What's going to go? Blah, blah, blah. So it's all this panic attack kind of pressure to get out the door. Then you get in the van and you just sit there and you drive for days and
so
days
relaxing.
and days. And then you get there and then the energy gets ramped up again and you're setting up and you're like, oh my God, I'm not going to get done. And at some point in the setup, I always say to myself, why do I make everything so goddamn hard? And it just is like,
I think you do.
And then it's like such a horrible thing. And then you do the show and you're talking to people and it's like a whirlwind and the show is done and you break it down and you're in your hotel room and you wake up the next morning and you're like, what just happened? I feel like I've just been thrown through a tornado or something.
That's why I like longer than I like a 4-day or 3-day show.
Yeah.
And it's those shows where you set up and you sell in the same day. I'm like, God, it's so hard. I'm like, it just to switch gears between the different humans that you are. And I'm like, you don't want to set up a guy doesn't want to go be selling guy. I'm not like a different guy. I can't.
It is.
I can't bring setup guy. Nobody's buying from setup guy.
No.
Setup guy stinks. He's kind of an asshole.
He swears regularly.
Yeah, he's just wearing a gross t-shirt. I mean, everybody even get our clothes and we try to get a shower. But the older I get, the harder of a time I have transitioning from setup guy to sales guy.
Oh.
And I don't like being the same guy.
And when it's the same day, it's awful, isn't it? You know what I mean? When you have to
really
lead right into sales after you've been setting up.
Well, night before is tough too. But I mean, I get it. If you're going to do a main thoroughfare show and you close the street, there's no way. They're not going to do, what are you going to do, a 10 o'clock night setup?
No.
I don't want to be 10 o'clock setup guy and then wake up and be there by 10. It sucks too, but it's all
This
hard.
was actually a nice treat for Artisphere this year, as they were able to offer a night before setup, which typically that's a morning of.
Yeah.
And our section of the show, there's plenty of room for people to pull their van up next to their tent on both sides of the street. So then there's a passing lane down the center. It works perfectly if the artists on either side of the street actually move their vehicles up tight against your tent. It's like we have to leave a passing lane. And I was the guy going a little this way, a little that way, doing the arrows, trying to keep people from taking out my brand new van.
Right. I don't know. Well, I mean, at least, we do deal with the stuff on our own. I like that thing where they give you like, here's our plan. Now you do it. And then you can kind of work together and be like, okay. But then the people at Old Town that are going to be like, they pull kind of 3/4 way off the road and then open up their van. Like, buddy, you got 17 people behind you. Do you think we're really just going to wait for you?
Yeah. Oh, I'll just be a minute. When they go, I'll just be a minute. Really, we always think it's a minute. But to get stuff out of the van, it's at least 20 to a half hour.
I have given people the just a minute finger, but it really is just like, hey, I need to run up in front of my neighbor and see if they're really going to fucking do that. Like, is this really happening?
Yeah, right.
And be like, okay, yeah, they're really doing that.
Okay.
And then I come back and Then we light our torches, and then we can get in our pitchforks and we drive them out of town.
Right on.
Push Frankenstein out of the tower. I don't know, man. I do love that, man. The piece to do it on your own. I'm looking forward to Des Moines here in about a month.
Mm-hmm.
That one. Those, like, have you ever seen a wider street than that?
No, that is really
like
great
that is
setup.
like. I mean, we can give the credit to the king if we want, but
Might as
my
well.
God,
He deserves it.
he didn't pave those streets, though. Those are the widest streets in the business.
He picked
Those
it.
things.
He picked it as
That
a good show
beautiful-
site.
Oh, hell yeah. Big old, beautiful downtown Des Moines. You got to have the streets wide enough for the storms to get through so they can
Right.
really just pick us all up and take us to Kansas.
The wind tunnel makes for
Yeah.
better wind
No.
tunnels or less wind tunnels. Not sure.
That one corner, he's going to stick me there, I bet.
So somebody has told me this over the years. It's like, it's always good. Every year, you should always try and do a new show to you every single year because you need to get in front of a new audience. And after a certain amount of time, after doing these shows for 20 some years like you and me, it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know if there is a new show out there that I haven't tried. Well, this was a new show for me. We've never gotten into Artisphere. And then I got to say, it was a nice treat to have new collectors and new eyes on our work and just feel like the new kid on the block. So that was a real
Beautiful
fun experience.
downtown.
Yeah, totally.
Did you find that I think I talked about this last year, but did you find that the crowd was aggressively friendly?
Oh my
to
God.
you? Like,
It immediately, when the first person walked in, I'm like, oh, this is what Will is talking about.
you felt it.
I felt-
Because I was like, I almost felt like they were making fun of me. Like,
yeah, it could be for sure. I mean,
like, oh, it's so nice to have you. I'm like, they don't mean that. Oh, wait,
do they know me?
They do mean that. Thank you so much for coming here. We really appreciate y'all coming down here. Oh my gosh, Santa Fe, New Mexico. My word.
I'm hearing south in your mouth over there, sir.
That is, I love those Southern accents. I miss the South. I do. I miss them. I miss the trees.
Well, you know what? The Minnesotans and the...
Oh, I'm not doing that.
You're not going down that road again. Okay, well, I'll do it. I'll do it for you because I can do it. The Minnesotans and the Southerners, it's like there's a huge language barrier. We
I
cut
gotta tell you, Douglas,
Yeah.
you actually don't need to exaggerate. You've already got it in there.
I know that. I understand.
You don't have to make an accent.
Okay. Well, don't you know?
All right.
As I'm talking to him down there, I caught myself and the people I'm talking to. This is our common conversation. Excuse me, what? What? What did you just say? Oh, and like, you don't ever want to use a word with a long O in it, like hose, because someone asked us, we have some pieces that we make for outside. And they're like, well, how do I clean this? And I'm like, well, just a hose. And they're like, a what? A hose. What is that? I'm like, HOSE. Oh, a hose.
A hose. That's try having a Southern accent or at least a little bit of one and trying to go into a truck stop and get I'll have to say it, tire iron. Because that one, tire, like it's just a ha, ta, ta, ta,
Yeah. And then they ask you where you're from and they say, let me guess. I'm like, okay, where do you think I'm from? They'll say, Sweden. Like, oh, for Christ's sake, we're from this country, for crying out loud.
Sweden. Amazing. All right. Well, the Southerners were good to you. That's good. You're moving on, and what are you doing next? You got a couple days off or what have you?
We got back last night, like I said, and we were dog tired. I'm like, this is going to be a good time for me to talk to Will because we're not going to be working in the studio today. It was just like, But I was thinking about this aspect of being a glass blower is when we go to leave, especially if it's going to be a long time, we don't turn our furnace off because we need the glass to be hot and molten and ready to work. It needs to be ready for us when we're ready to work on it. And I don't know that every medium has to think about their studio or their materials in that way. Like, I would guess that you can just like be done with whatever stage you're at, flip off the lights, walk out of the studio and just come back to it. I mean, right?
Oh yeah, totally. I could go paint right now. I haven't been at my easel in a week because I've had a lot of kid activities and we went to the Stones and I got sick after that. And
wow.
So yeah, I haven't really been in here. It's kind of nice to be back, but it's when I'm packing for a show and I'm pulling pieces of like shrink wrap and this bubble wrap. I've got this foam wrap that I put between my paintings, and I've got, it's just, I don't know, it's a huge mess. It looks like a bomb went off, so I've got to sweep things up. But yeah, I could go paint like in 10 minutes. So like right now, there's nothing I got to do.
For us, we have to make sure that our crucible that holds all the glass, we try and get it as empty as possible, because we don't want to leave an entire 300 pounds of glass sitting in a crucible at 2,000 degrees. If the power goes out, if the crucible breaks while we're gone, it could actually ruin a $35,000 furnace.
Wow.
So if we know we're going to be gone for like 2 weeks at a time, we have to try and time it so that we're in the mode of having it pretty empty. We can drop the temperature slightly, but not so low that it would make the refractory that creates the walls of the furnace to like shrink or expand incorrectly. So we have to like, it's very strange. We have to make sure that we protect ourselves, protect our equipment. So today is a day where we have to kind of bring the temperature back up, fill the furnace back up, and then we can work in the studio again in a day or two.
Okay.
That's kind of our thing. Different than any other medium out there.
Yeah, totally. That and I guess potters too. But
yeah, if they're like firing.
Talk about that.
Yeah, like pizzas or whatever. So back to Greenville, one thing that's unique about them is they feed us really well. They're one of those shows where they've got an artist hospitality, and they used, like a lot of shows might use the texting method to let you know if a big storm is coming. And some shows you might go to and they never even need to text you because there's just no problems. Well, they use the texting there to let you know every time the meals are ready. So it feels like
so nice. Every
2 hours they're like, artist hospitality, hot meal ready for you to go. And, I'm like trying to watch my weight these days. And I found myself every time, it's like Pavlov's dog. Time to go grab some more food.
Do they understand it when you say "ope" in the South, by the way? Ope.
Guess not. I guess maybe that might be one of those language barrier points.
That's another one. Oh. That's another one. No, Carrie and Robin take really good care of the folks there. And I know my wife had a wonderful time there at in lovely Greenville as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, I got to stop by her booth and say, hey.
Nice. She said it was very sitcom-y when you popped in. It was like, boop, ding dong, and like popping in, like the neighbor popping over. She was laughing about it. She was like, it was sweet to see you.
Kind of like Lenny and Squiggy. She probably just said something off color, and I go, hello.
I do. That's one of my favorite jokes. I love those guys. Hey, you had asked me a question last week about that we didn't talk about on the podcast, but we were talking about designers and do you deal with designers a lot? I imagine you probably do. Like, how do you like to deal with that?
I actually, since we've been stepping into these kind of bigger installation thing that we're trying to work with and stuff, I wanted to ask you about that because I know there are a lot of 2D artists out there that designers are kind of part of their business model.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. There are designers that I feel like I can't get in the door. They're typically larger projects, and I feel like I can't get in the door without a designer, and I'm not going to be in the space without them leading me there. So I feel like it's a well-earned thing, and I typically deal differently and will tell the designer that too. Like, I don't really talk to the client, and I'm kind of like, hey, that's your job. And you can say it kind of funny, but like, that's how I do it. I'm like, look, you're earning, and my standard is 30%.
Okay.
For a designer and brick and mortar gallery and something like that. And I know a lot of people have a hard time with that, but the 50%, and they're bringing the people in the door and they're paying the rent and they're looking at your work. And I realize that it takes a lot longer to sell a piece in a gallery. So you need that rent. And so that's where, and if you're selling in galleries, you have to be priced high enough that it's not going to hurt you if it takes 50%.
So that 30%, if let's say somebody, a designer walks in your booth, has never seen your work before, you've never worked with them before, and they say, I have a client and this might be the perfect piece, can you give me a designer discount? Would you just quote them that 30, or is it kind of a start of a conversation with them?
I don't know. Sometimes, I read people for a living. So you telling me the story, I can't tell if they're bullshitting me or not.
Right. I got a text from a designer who said, can you offer me a discount? And my first instinct was, well, how do I know if this isn't just somebody wanting it for themselves and saying they're a designer,
So typically what I'll do with a designer, and this is the way all right, here's what you're supposed to say.
Okay.
You're supposed to give them some line about like, your first purchase is blah, blah, blah. I'm like, the problem is on like wholesale days when they used to do wholesale days at like ACC Baltimore.
Yeah.
Wholesale days would bring in, the designer and their designer friend, and the designer friend would be like, let me go, and then they go shopping the show to try to get 50% off.
Mm-hmm.
But your job is to weed that out. Be like, look, I can put an order together for you. I'm not just going to sell you a piece.
Mm-hmm.
And since I don't do that, I have a hard time figuring out what the language is. I know you and Renee used to do that show, but isn't there some kind of language where you're like, on your first order, you can take this piece out the door, or I'll give you 50% off of this piece once you place your first order, but it's full price right now.
Here's what I did with an installation, hoping to foster a future kind of relationship. And it was kind of what you were describing. I said, well, here's what we'll do. I said, I'll give you a 10% discount, so that you can get paid for finding us. I appreciate that. And as you have other projects that you might use us for, that is a negotiable percentage that we can discuss as we move forward. Because I kind of feel like she found us a really nice, she took home one of our new pieces to this really beautiful home, and we wouldn't have made that connection without the designer. So I feel like it was a kind of a good foot in the door.
Okay. It's a little different. Like what I want the designer who's going to continually put me into their spaces.
Mm-hmm.
They see me and it's like, okay, well, I'm making this room. I want to be their guy.
Yeah.
And so those are the kind of designers I'm looking for. I'm not looking for the one shot.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
My hillbilly ass isn't getting in the front door of this house without this lady.
Yeah.
She's got to bring me in there, and I'm the help. And I'm like, don't look him in the eye, kind of thing.
You might try
don't
and
make
sell
eye
you other
contact.
stuff.
You're like, oh, I don't. Yes, I'm sorry. Let me hang my little painting. And I know the deal. I know that's the way it is. But
and put your blue booties on too as you walk through their house.
Oh yeah. Do you want me to take my shoes off while I huff the latex carpet sealant glue that you've just put down? And it's so nasty. I don't know, but that's the job.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm kind of stepping into that, and I kind of thought, well, I'll give a little discount to start to hopefully think that if there's more, we can keep, up to the 30. I didn't know kind of what other people did. So 30 is kind of standard?
I think 30 is standard.
Okay.
I believe that 30 is standard, but, we write our own laws and rules.
For sure.
And some artists, they sell in galleries and get a better deal than my 50%, I'm sure, but...
Mm-hmm. You were talking about this a while ago, how you were texting a collector, and Camille Marchese walked by, show director, and saw you, and she says, get off your phone.
Right.
Well, that was happening to me. This designer had seen us in the morning. She's got confirmation from the client they liked it, and we did a lot of conversation over my phone. Well, texting over my phone. And I feel like this is going to be a nice sizable sale. So do I keep my head down and text and ignore anyone walking in the booth? Or do I close the deal? Well, I closed the deal. Luckily Renee was there to kind of, but still I don't want to give the appearance when people walk in that I'm not interested. Like, I'm just texting Will right now about the podcast. No, it's like, you know what I mean? We're there to work.
Right.
But they don't know that.
That's where Renee really, really comes into effect too. Like you can let her know and then step behind the booth and take care of business. But bird in hand is bird in hand. A lot of people these days don't even want to talk to you. And I've had clients come in, see a painting, walk away, then want to start texting about it. And like, dude, it's a big sale. I gotta do the thing. I'm going to dance however I have to dance.
But it's so much harder to read them when you text, don't you think?
Yeah, for sure. That's impossible. Also, the husband on the phone I find is the toughest one. Shitty kid, shitty teenager. That's a big one. What do you think, Jimbo? And he's like, I hate it. And you're like, you just kind of want to punch him. Oh, really? I thought you'd think it was cool. Now I hate it.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah. Why are you giving this little turd an opinion? They're too little.
I think we've come back to the point where we say it's not a parenting podcast. We tend to dip into bad parenting.
When I'm selling, I'm an abusive parent. Abusive to the other kids. Man, no, I can't deal with it. But the other one is spouse on the phone.
Yeah.
I can't deal with spouse on the phone. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do that one. Like I'm too, like it's really tough. Like, and actually I sold one in Texas at a really nice sale to spouse on the phone. But you know, that was all him falling in love with the piece and convincing the wife. I'm like, but he did like, man, I hate FaceTime. I freaking hate FaceTime. My nephews,
me too.
and like, I love that they want to be in touch with me at all, but I can't. Like, they were like, hey, let's catch up this weekend, and then I see a FaceTime come through. I'm like,
I just got out of the shower, man.
like, can't I just put my headphones on and still like do laundry and do the thing? Like, I don't want to. Like, I got to sit down and have you look at me. Like, and it's never you're gonna look up my nose.
You already hate talking on the phone. Now
I do.
Add video on top of that, for Christ's sake.
Right.
I've found what works for us is I tend to feel like our work, the woman falls in love with it. And I know this is a generality, you know, generalizing or whatever, but the woman falls in love with it. And we've got the husband who's like, yeah, whatever you like. So in those situations, I am talking to the wife and telling her all about it. And Renee talks to the husband. And the two of us tag teaming always ends up closing the deal. It just works out really great for our process.
Swingers.
Nice. Art show swingers.
That's what you're swinging.
We got
it's
a
like,
title.
Put your keys in the bowl. Yeah. Put your keys in the beautiful glass bowl, folks. We've sold another one.
We're sending something home with them.
All right.
Yeah.
So, I see how you do. That's right.
That's our technique.
That's the way I feel. Get me in the door. I'm getting art laid. If I could just get me in the door with my big painter, like I've got a showing. I'm like, oh, yes.
Nice.
Got to just get me in the door. My wife's going to love that joke.
Hey, so last episode, we started down a topic, but then we took it to AI. And
lovely.
The person I chatted with initially at my previous show, who brought the conversation up about technology in artwork, what we think about that. We kind of just went to AI. I'm open to a conversation here about like stuff like 3D printing or whatever kinds of technology where that line comes in. I mean, do you have an opinion or thoughts on any of that?
Different than what we talked about last week?
Well, different than the whole like putting a word in or an image in and having AI spit it out. Like this conversation came up again online recently. I saw either on NAIA forum or Art Fair Review, and just asking about technology and AI. And then there were some jewelers who came up with saying, well, listen, anyone who uses a mold, that's bad for me. I'm a handmade artist, and I feel like that art show should be that. Or anyone using 3D printing, I think that should be outlawed. And those are things we don't use, and I don't know anything about any of that. So I don't know how it would affect a jeweler if another jeweler was using those techniques or any of that. My big thing is production studios. That's the thing that hurts us the most, is when there's a glass blower who has a team of glass artists back in their studio while they're at the show selling, making pieces that they're going to be selling at the next show. Like that, I feel like hurts our bottom line.
Yeah, it does.
Right. But that you don't have any, I mean, that doesn't affect you in any way. You know?
It definitely does affect me. Okay. I don't know where to go with this.
Sure. Yeah. It might be a topic we have no opinion on or have no ability to comment on.
No, I've got a strong opinion, but I can't really. You know, I've thought long and hard about this, Douglas, and I kind of come down to this point. I've been asked by a couple of different directors, and I've been asked by you, and sometimes I come down to this point where I'm like, yeah.
I'm like that too, though. I mean, I feel like I don't know enough about it.
I do. It's funny. It's like I don't. It's almost like I don't have any hard and fast rules. You know, like should a 3D artist and a 2D artist, or an artist that makes 3D and 2D, be allowed to sell in the same booth? And I'm like, no. And then you go, well, what about Erica Iman? Oh, yes.
Yes.
Like, because it doesn't make any sense to me, like, to have one without the other of her work.
I agree.
Like, I don't want to see her paintings without her sculptures. I want to see the same booth. It brings me a lot of joy to see that booth, and it makes cohesive sense. What about should jewelry and sculpture be shown in the same booth? No, you have to jury separately. What about Matthew Nafsker? Oh, well, that one, he's making these vessels that look like the jewelry came in the space vessel and they all arrived in the same planet, and it's all part of his narrative. So yes, that should be allowed.
Or John Whipple. Same thing. Sculpture and paintings. I mean, yeah.
I want to see art, and I want to be enriched, and I want to see the thing, and I want to see your whole story. So I don't know. There's lots of little ways. And then as soon as you try to have a hard and fast rule on something, then it's much easier for the cheaters to go and try to find their loopholes.
Well, Tiffany is another one I think about. Tiffany Ownby. She has these really cool sculptures. And then behind, on all of her walls, she's got 2D art.
And I don't want to see one without the other.
Exactly.
I want to see both.
For sure.
It's a beautiful thing, and it's a whole part of the entire artist's story. So I don't feel like, but again, once you establish the rules, then the cheaters are like, haha, I see your loophole. Yeah. And then they go around and they try to get into the thing. So I don't know. I hate that there have to be cheaters out there, but it is a testament to how well this industry is still working, right?
Right. Well, I think the fine art festivals, really the key behind it is kind of like not the small artist, you know what I mean? The small operation that is not having tons of employees making their work for them, is not this polished, slick thing. It's like meeting the person who made the work and talking about the techniques they use to make the work. I think that is the whole draw of our market. And I think we could sit and dissect things to death. And maybe with the birth of AI, it seems like every medium might have their own particular barriers that they have to have in front of them. And maybe that would be a regular conversation we have with different guests, just to find out, well, how does it affect a photographer versus how does it affect a sculpture person, or a glass artist or mixed media, whatever.
Right. Yeah. I was thinking about that yesterday. I was looking at some absolutely breathtaking photos that David Mayhew took.
Cool. Yeah.
Of the Aurora Borealis and the Northern Lights. And he took these incredible photos, and I looked at it, and I'm pretty critical about AI online. If somebody posts one, I'm like, hey, maybe share a picture from an artist and not a thing, But I'm like, man, this poor guy's really going to have a lot of conversations. He just took this natural photo without any filters, and it doesn't look real.
Right.
How's he going to show that? And how's he going to talk about it?
Yeah.
Poor Sean Harris too. We should talk to him. Sean Harris creates these amazing livable landscapes and with his masks and his photography. And it's like, well, how does that change his conversation too? Mm-hmm. We're name dropping a lot of folks and only out of respect for their craft. But I just want to know. I want to know more about that. And it's an interesting conversation going forward. And I think it's case by case.
And also a sense of community, bringing those people up, because we are a community of people. And perhaps you might find yourself fitting into these kinds of categories, and it's like, oh, there's an artist out there that maybe I could network with or find out their experience, and that maybe those conversations can keep going even beyond what we're talking about here on the air.
Plus, all those people are cool, and we want to sound cool.
That's right. We know them. They're pretty damn awesome.
We're not name dropping any hacks.
No, we're not. Hey, I tried something else different this week that I wanted to talk about. So I think we've talked, all the way back with Marjolaine about collecting people's information, how different ways to do it.
Sure.
And I discovered something new. Maybe everybody...
Face scan? You did a little face scan?
You
just did a...
I did.
Right.
Yes, all right.
Good job. All right.
But hey,
push them into AI.
On Square, how it used to be when you go to do a checkout, and if you enabled the black screen to pop up and say, hey, let's stay connected, and you could capture their emails that way. Well, I haven't seen that for a while. I think they did an update and that changed or whatever, or maybe it just got unenabled and I didn't find it. But I found another way to do that, and that is when you ring in your purchase or the purchase onto Square and you hit review sale. At the very top of the page, there is a button that says add customer, and you can go in there, you can tap them. And if you've sold to them before, you can type their name into the drop down and then you can link them, or you can add them and you can put their name and their email address. Well, then that syncs to Square. It syncs to what they've bought from the past. And it will also sync to your MailChimp or anything else that shares integrations with Square. and you capture them now into your mailing list, bam, automatically, right at the time of
question.
sale. Yeah.
Do you do that before you hit charge or after?
Before you tap the card onto the reader or onto your phone. So it's in the process of after you have typed in $5,000 painting, and then you hit review sale, and that's when you add their name.
Quick word of warning for you. I did run a small one, and that was kind of a loaded question because I did it wrong, and added it after I'd run the sale, and then I added it, and they said now charge customer, and I hit charge customer, and I charged him again. So then, like, luckily he got a double receipt, and as he was doing it, I was like walking out and then tapping his shoulder and being like, "Hey, if you see a double charge, wait another minute. I did that wrong. I apologize."
And you could reverse it.
You should get a refund here in just a sec.
Yeah.
And so he was cool, but just be careful of how you do it. You got to do it the right order.
Do you do the tap on your phone thing, or do you still do the little reader thing?
I mean, I've got the reader in case the tap doesn't work, but
right.
I do tap on the phone.
Yeah, I did that this week for the first time. And I mean, that was like, and I had heard somebody posted online, be careful it doesn't take it out of your Apple Pay or something like that. So I was like concerned about that I was going to mess it up and be paying for my own work and sending people home with it.
I think they did something because that happened. I think Chris Dahlquist was kind enough to point us out to that early on. And I think they've had an update where that doesn't necessarly happen anymore.
Okay, so you don't have to be extra careful on it. It's not like that just does it on its own kind of thing. Mystery.
Talking about ears burning. I don't know if this is a Southern expression or not, but if you're talking about somebody and their ears are burning, we mentioned Stephen King. Damned if he didn't just email.
Oh,
Let me see,
hilarious.
because that guy likes to have his emails responded to almost immediately.
And he says, "Oh, Will, I put you in that spot you were talking about on the phone. I happened to overhear you."
He did. You're getting a live update. I'm looking at my booth space while
nice.
we're on the phone. Let's looks like he put me just where I want it to be. He's got
perfect
killer staff there. That's incredibly nice woman.
Is it Sage?
That is, I don't.
Sage? Yeah, I got an email from Sage today.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, and she said, "How would you like your name written on the booth sign? Would you like Douglas Sigworth and Renee Sigworth, or Douglas and Renee Sigworth?" And anyone who didn't just come off a 17-hour drive and had very little sleep last night wouldn't have responded like this. I'm like, maybe I'm groggy, but what's the difference between those two? And she had to explain to me, hold my hand and go, so one is you each have your own last name, and the other one is shared.
Like, basically, I'm trying to ask you if I can avoid 7 extra letters on your name tag.
There you go.
That's
if
what
I
I'm
could
really
make
trying
it
to.
less than like you.
8, by the way, that's 8. I miscounted. I just counted on my fingers. You can't see the thing there.
Didn't have to go to your toes. So you were
yeah,
good.
how we doing? How much more yammering do we have to do?
We're getting there. Hey, I wanted to say, I see this note here, and I hear that there is a return of the truck. What is that all about?
Dude, okay, check yourself.
Okay.
Return of the truck. Yep. I don't know if I'll drive it again, but I took it to a new mechanic this time, and I'm like, I just want to sell this thing. Just let me know, try to get this check engine light off and, see what we can do. And he came back with a 4,000 plus repair estimate on this thing. And
this is
and
the
I'm
last guy you said? The last
this
mechanic?
Is the last
okay.
guy. And so I'm like, God damn it. I just wanted to sell this thing and be done. And then he offered me money for it. He's like, look, if you want to sell it, we're mechanics. We can sell it. And he gave me a super low ball offer. And I'm like, I don't know. Let me think about it. So I left, luckily. Took it to my mechanic for a second opinion. My check engine light was because I was out of Freon.
Oh, fuck.
The reason it's running sloppy is that it needed an oil filter. And then the other check engine light was because they didn't reset it from last time of something that had already been fixed that he had fixed. Not he, but the one I trust. He was like, yeah, that one's my bad. And he's like, yeah, I know you want to sell it, but it's going to be a little expensive. I'm like, how much are we talking? He's like, I don't know. I think I can get you out of here for $300.
Are you kidding me?
$300.
Think of all the vans you've rented since then. It's like,
I think I probably still would have, but I probably just would have sold it.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that I'm taking it back out. I'm used to the van now. But if I can get out from underneath that truck and get a fat down payment on a decent van.
Right. And it's good to know that selling it, it's like you're not having to like keep your fingers crossed that another engine light doesn't pop on before you sell it. That you can sell it in good conscience.
Right. Park City was my last. I missed, Renee there in Park City was kind enough to let us still set up the show on Saturday. We missed the opening Friday night.
Yeah.
Man, what a drag. I thought that was funny, though, when I looked at my numbers from Park City, and they're like, well, how was it? You want to know if it's up or down.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, it was down by a third.
That's weird. I had a third of the time at the show. Yeah. How does that work?
I myself was missing a third. So, hats off to that regularity.
Yeah. Before we head out, I just want to say we lost a giant out there on the art show scene. Artist and jeweler Bob Triscoe passed away.
I can't believe it. Kind of thought we'd be seeing him forever. And is that what we're going to do now? We're just going to die at shows? At
the show. He literally passed away, not on the, not.
Yeah, after setup and before opening, right? Something like that. Not to talk too much dirt, but
it's shocking.
I don't know. I mean, it is shocking, and it is applicable to what we all go through. Man, legend. Yeah.
I had an uncle once who would always talking about my relatives and my other aunts and uncles, and he would say, you know what, they're going to die in their boots. And that was not a good thing. That was an expression that meant they hadn't saved enough money for them to retire and do nothing. And I always thought to myself, well, I want to die in my boots. You know what I mean? I want to live until I die. And doing what we love to do is making art and traveling to shows. And he has had such a presence out there and so many collectors who look forward to buying his work.
I don't want to die in my vintage shirt and my cargo shorts. But I want to sit my fat ass on a beach somewhere. But he lived a long, full life, and it's going to be sad not to see him out there.
I remember seeing him when we would fly home from shows, and I knew he was in the show. And we would board the plane to fly home, and there he was sitting in first class. So hopefully he's in first class on the other side over there.
Cheers to that.
Cheers to that. And one more thing before we go. When we signed off last time, we were talking about how much it meant to us to have people come in the booth and share with us about the podcast and what it means to them. And that really is cool and heartwarming. And I met somebody at this show, who wasn't in the show. They're an artist who didn't really know how to make a living, didn't even think artists could make a living from what they were told. And they said that listening to the podcast that they found us looking around for artist podcast shows and stuff to listen to, and they got an account on Zap and they started applying to shows. They're learning what needs to be done to get out there and to do it. So I'm glad to know, Will, that you and I, by just talking about what we do, that it has some impact on people out there and their career and forming careers.
They're going to hit the street fully formed, as a bitter old crank. They're going to be like, well, let me go ahead and hit my foot with a hammer. And don't talk to me while I eat. Well, that is very validating and flattering. So thank you out there, and be kind to each other, and keep your vans tight to the curb, and
keep a passing lane.
Yeah, that's right. Trying to give you some advice. That's all I got. All right, my friend, let's find somebody to talk to next week. What do you say?
I think we'll make that happen. All right, man.
All right, brother.
We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
This podcast is brought to you by the National Association of Independent Artists. The website is naiaartists.org.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. That's zapplication.org. And while you're at it, find us on social media and engage in these conversations.
Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when we release new episodes.
Oh, and if you like the show, we'd love it if you would give us your 5-star rating and offer up your most creative review on your podcast streaming service. See you next time.